Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? My name is Kyle, you know me as Dragonmar, and welcome to a new video. Today, we're going to be going over 10 tips to make you a much smarter player in Valorant. The idea behind these tips are things that don't really have anything to do with aim. This is all part of your brain, this is all game sense, and these are fundamental to becoming a better player, and everyone should be doing these always. And if you're not, well, you've come to the right video. Now, I also want to say I will be streaming every single day in January. I really would love to see you guys on stream, twitch.tv/Dragonmar. Hope to see you guys there. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and tap that bell for more. And without any further ado, let's start the video. Starting things off with tip number 1, and that is to try to bait out enemy ultimates as often as possible. Now, some of the ultimates you guys should be looking for are, and this is probably the biggest one, Raze. So Raze's rocket launcher is probably one of the most frustrating ults to have to fight against, especially when you're on attack and you're trying to push in and the defender has the ult and your team just gets crushed. We've all been there. So what you're looking for is pre-round, you always want to check, see who has ult going into that round. And if you see someone like a Raze or a Sage have their ult, you should be able to play around it. One of the most common spots for Razes to ult is on split in mid. So if you put some early pressure in mid, you can generally hear her ult, but thankfully, because of the way market and sewer are sort of structured, you can almost always get out of there safely. This is a great way to bait out the ults. Apply some early pressure, let them ult, and then back off. Another thing is with Sage ult, right? Sage is going to look for those reses. So a lot of times people get pretty aggressive. If you apply some early pressure, get an early pick, but you hang around where you got that kill, you don't fully back off, a lot of the times the Sage will actually rotate over, go for the res, and then you have a chance there to make a big play, kill the Sage, and then kill the person being res. This happens all the time. But a big thing here is to learn how to bait ults properly. It makes you a much smarter player, and it really provides some nice value to your team. Tip number 2 is to play for retakes on defense. If you guys aren't aware, one of the most common mistakes for newer players in Valorant is to just try to defend against any sort of attack no matter what. It's kind of like that super heroic stand on like a hilltop, right? When you're just getting rushed by 30 men in like World War II and you die, but it's very heroic, but you die. That's kind of like what I imagine new players feel like when they're playing on bomb sites. Playing for a retake is fundamental to the game, especially at the higher levels. And essentially what this means is when you're outgunned, when you're outnumbered, when you don't have the abilities to hold off the enemy, sometimes it's perfectly fine to completely back off of a site, let the enemy team take it, let them use their utility, let them plant, and then retake that site with your teammates. This is extremely smart. This is something not enough people do as well because, like I said, a lot of people are trying to make the hero plays. Very important here. And one of the things that I would say to help you figure out, hey, when should I retake? When should I try to hold? If you're playing solo, immediately that's a good idea to retake probably. If you hear more than like 3 or 4 people rushing, right, always a good idea. Probably try to play for a retake. If you don't have abilities, like you don't have your smokes up, your flashes aren't available, good idea to play for a retake as well. So when you are essentially down a significant amount of either utility or manpower, that's when it's a good idea to rotate. Let that team come in, reinforce yourself, and then attack together. Take that site back with your teammates and with their utility as well. Tip number 3 is about checking for abilities when you're going to either defuse or maybe plant the spike. So one of the biggest problems for people to sort of defend against and prepare for our lineups, and on top of that are just like set mollies and things. So whether it's a Killjoy, a Brimstone, a Viper, or maybe, you know, some other agent with an ultimate, when you guys are going to plant the spike, always check and see if you hear that buzzing noise of a Killjoy. Or if you're going for the post plant and you have to defuse, have you guys seen that Brimstone in a while? No? Does he have his ultimate? Is he lining up a molly? These are things you guys want to pay attention to. And one person I haven't mentioned yet, Sova, his shock darts, right? It is really important to understand that once you start getting, you know, up there in the ranks, gold, plat, elo, you are going to run into Sovas who know the lineups for the plant spots. You need to pay attention. You will hear the noise of the arrows, of the shock darts coming in. It gives you enough time to back up, but you should never be getting caught off guard by this. So just a reminder, if you guys want to play smarter, when you enter a site and when you're going for the plants, always be ready to destroy mollies and be ready for those post-plant lineups. Now, tip number 4 is about checking the enemy economy each round. You don't need to have an economics degree for it. Thankfully, I do. But what you're looking for here is checking to see how many credits the enemy team has on each player. One of the keys here is 3,900. 3,900 credits means someone can buy a Vandal or a Phantom with full armor or full shield. 3,400 means that, or excuse me, 3,300 means that they can buy full shield with a Vandal or a Phantom as well. And 5,000. 5,000 credits is a big one because that means that there is a possibility of an op in play. If an op is in play, it's almost random who has it, right? Normally the people with 5k aren't the ones buying the ops. So generally someone else is going to have it. Sometimes that person will, of course. So if someone has 5k, you should always play those rounds as if there could be an opper, which means don't dry peek like a dummy, you know, play it smart, play it safe. Checking the economy each round is huge, and this is a big part of the strategic play you see at higher levels. What people are looking for is to see, what do we need to buy, or what can we buy here? What can we get away with, as well as a big one, right? If the enemy team is all below like 3k, you might be able to stick on some SMGs or something, you know? You might not have to upgrade that round. See how far you can take those bad guns, right? This is all really important. Or when the enemy team is like split buying, when some of them force, some of them don't, you could take advantage of that. Okay, these guys bought Spectres, but the other guys are saving at 2,900 right now. Let's go push their site. Challenging players with bad economy is a huge part of being a smarter player. We do this all the time in my ranked games. When I see a Cypher for like 2k, I'm like, heck yeah, we're pushing that site. That guy can't even afford trips, you know? Very, very important to check the enemy economy each round before it begins. Tip number 5, you guys have heard me talk about this a lot. It is to always plant the spike for post plant. You guys know what this means, but I'm going to go over it for those of you who don't. If you guys are planting the spike, always plant it for all of the sight lines possible, especially typical post plant spots. I've used the example of A on Heaven quite frequently, where sometimes people will plant really close to sewer without realizing that yes, it's an okay plant spot for the post plant in the sewer, but if someone is playing long A, defending that spike plant, they're not going to be able to see the spike. They're going to have to move up that sort of hallway there with vision into window as well, or from window. Very dangerous. So instead, if you plant further over, sewer can still see it, but your player long can see it as well. This goes for all maps, all sites, regardless. Always plant in the open if possible. This is a huge part about being smarter because people do lose rounds based off of where the spike is planted. Oftentimes, what loses the rounds actually is that the spike will be planted in a spot where an enemy can defuse it without being seen. So someone will run to a post plant spot, think that they can see the diffuser, they cannot, and they get to defuse. Do not be one of those people. Put the spikes into proper spots. Tip number 6 kind of goes off of tip number 1 about baiting ults, but it's to always call out enemy ults pre-round and to check to see who on your team and who on their team are close to ultimates as well. Oftentimes you can actually predict enemy movement based off of who is one ult orb away from having their ultimate. Why, you might ask? Well, because they're probably going to go try to get one of the orbs around the map. Therefore, you can play around those orbs, you can defend them. If you're on attack, you essentially become a defender of the orb. Kind of fun, kind of smart, and oftentimes you can get a lot of nice information and a lot of kills off of that. But the point here really is that every single round, you will know exactly who has ult and who can get ult in that round. This should change the way you play. Like we talked about with Raze, if you know a Raze is playing on a certain site and they have their ultimate, why on earth would you go there, right? Just stay away from it unless you are going to try to use like a jet to maybe bait the ult and then dash away or something. But if possible, we do want to stick away and stay away from these ultimates. How do you do that? By being smarter and checking out pre-round who has ultimates and who is close. Same goes for your teammates. Are your teammates close to ultimates? Especially, I love doing this for Phoenixes, by the way. Checking to say, hey, Phoenix, are you close to your ult? You are, you're one away. Let's get you this orb. Let's have you ult into a site on attack, right? Love doing that. Goes for you and your team as well. Don't just think about the enemies. Look at everybody's ultimate charges. See where people are at, and see what you can take advantage of. Tip number 7 is getting into a little bit of map control, some strategy here. 7 is all about running defaults and establishing map control throughout the game. So if you guys are unaware, a default is essentially when your team holds positions in every lane of the map. Generally, there's about 3 lanes in these maps. You're going to have somebody covering all of those so that there is no surprises. No one can get through, no one can flank. Any information, you will know if someone does something. Now, this also is a more passive play style. This isn't something where you're pushing up looking for kills. You are generally playing more defensive, holding defaults. What is this good for? Map control. That's the second part of this tip. Establishing map control is one of the keys to the game. Ask any Counter-Strike player out there, they'll tell you the same thing. Ask any Overwatch player what the purpose of tanks are, they'll tell you the same thing as well. Map control is huge. Same thing in Valorant. One of the best ways to establish it, of course, through my purple smoky boy Omen. I love establishing map control. I love throwing those smokes down into, strategic locations that give us an advantage, that take away enemy vision, block their vision, allow us to take control. Remember, establishing map control is more than just being there. Using your smokes to cut off vision is, in a sense, denying enemy map control, and that is sometimes just as good. You should always be looking for these opportunities. Running a default is a really great way to start, but later on, you do want to establish map control through smoke usage and through the positioning of your players to essentially make sure a few things happen, right? One, you're not getting flanked. Two, the enemy team isn't pushed up far enough to get really good information on you, right? Being able to hear all your sound cues or maybe even have some sort of weird angle setup or anything like that. You want as much control as possible for as long as possible. One thing people forget is when you do not establish map control, especially on a map like Ascent, it's not the fact that mid is open, it's the fact that because mid is open, the enemy team knows you're somewhere else and they can send the proper rotates to those sites. Tip number 8 is something I love talking about, and that is to always play for trades and to take fights together. You guys know trading is one of the most important parts of Valorant when it comes to teamwork. Trading also heavily relies on your positioning. One of the smartest things that you can do if you're kind of new to the game is to buddy up with somebody, especially if they're playing a duelist. Stick with them, be kind of like 1 to 2 steps behind them, but always in a position to make a trade, to take a fight with them. Even if they die, as long as you're able to secure that kill, that is generally a win. And a lot of people do not do this. They'll be hanging too far behind or not at all. If you see your teammates going in, guys, it's really important to be there with them. Sometimes you can turn their bad play into a positive, but if you're not trading, you're not doing that. Taking fights together is obviously something that does require some communication. I would highly recommend you guys use your mics to communicate this type of stuff. I know some people don't, but if you're not using your mic and you're not finding trades often, I bet that has something to do with it. Either way, though, playing for trades is massive. Remember, guys, do not put yourself into positions where you can't be traded. That is often a sign of over-aggression. Try to hang back more, try to play off your teammates, and try to make sure they know what you're doing as well. Sometimes the problem comes down to miscommunication rather than a lack of communication, right? Sometimes you're just communicating the wrong things. Not calling out flashes, not calling out your timing of entries, things like that are very, very crucial. That way your teammates know how to help you. Sometimes it's not that people aren't talking, it's just that they're saying the wrong thing. That can be easily fixed. But either way, at the end of the day, as long as you're playing for trades, that is the most important thing. Tip number 9 is to have a plan for your abilities before you use them. Essentially, what this tip means is to stop being wasteful. You might think that you are a smart player, but then why did you just throw that molly? Why did you throw that grenade? Why did you use your boom bot there? Why did you smoke that? Right? If you can't answer those questions consistently, chances are you're probably not using your abilities with some sort of plan in mind. You might just be using them out of the fact that you know you're supposed to. Very, very important to understand that wasting abilities is sometimes worse than not using them at all. Oftentimes, what you're doing is you're giving away valuable information, letting the enemy team know exactly where you are. So this is really important because when you use an ability, especially something like a smoke or a flash, you should have a plan behind it. One of the most common errors I see in my coaching and VOD reviews is that people will use flashes and then not do anything with them. They'll flash over a smoke and never even touch the smoke. They'll flash around a corner just to back up. Things that just don't make sense. When you guys are using an ability, always have a plan for it, and that is a really surefire way of ensuring that you are going to get some value out of it. Because if you're just using abilities because you know you need to, right, you're just going through the motions, that is not the proper way to do it. You should always have a plan in mind. And honestly, sometimes the best way to do this is to ask your teammates. Be like, hey, where do you need this? Where do you want my smokes? Can I flash you in here? Things like that can go a long way to you using your utility properly, and that is a big part of being a smarter player. Now, tip number 10 is something I don't talk about too often, but it's about being a positive teammate. And you might be thinking, how does this make me a smarter player? Well, I'm gonna get into that. There's a few crucial things that can happen during the very early stages of a game, and that is the communication between the team and your teammates, right? Is how you guys are talking to each other. Sometimes it's dead silent and you know you're in for a long one. Sometimes some guys like raging already or toxic or tilted off the last game. That's not a good sign either. But there are some things you can do, I think, that can really help set the tone for the game. One is to always say hi to guys. guys. Just say, hey, what's going on, or what's up, or hello, things like that. Seriously, it does go a long way to start the communication off early. Another thing I love doing for people is saying nice try in any kind of clutch situation, in any, even losing like a 1v3, say nice try. It goes a long way and it sets the tone for the team. One thing that comes with being a smarter player is understanding how to interact with other people. I know us gamers struggle with that sometimes, but it's a very important part about this game and about any competitive FPS. And sometimes the way you talk to people is all that matters in how they treat you. And sometimes if you're nice enough, they'll actually listen to what you say, even if it's a bad idea, which is how I get my way most of the time in a game like this. So what I'm trying to say here is that being positive and being nice to people is sometimes the smartest thing you can do in a game. You can untilt your teammates, you can bring people together, you can get people working together, because the earlier you guys start talking, chances are you're going to keep talking throughout the game, right? And if you like them enough, you can party up with them too and keep moving forward. But I just want to leave this here as the final tip, because I think it's an important one. And I think that people don't understand the importance of like setting the tone for the team, and they think that, you know, they can just talk like in round 3 and everything will be fine. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes people won't answer because there's no connection, right? It sounds dumb, but seriously, guys, this works. You just gotta trust me. And guys, that's going to do it for the video. I really hope you enjoyed. Like I said, I am going to be streaming every day on Twitch for the month of January. Hope to see you guys there on stream at twitch.tv/Dragonmar. Let me know what type of video you guys want to see in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy and peace.